Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchaira, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchaira.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchaira with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for those that are following the show and continue to follow the show. We're having some problems ever since COVID doing a live Facebook feed, but we posted on Facebook afterwards, so everybody is able to enjoy the show. For almost 11 years, we've been doing the radio and now podcast, and excited to really extend the welcome to not only the new people, the followers, but also those that have been following the show for years. We have some people that have been following the show for 10 plus years, which is pretty remarkable. So I'll take that as hopefully we're doing a pretty good job. And so today we got a great topic. Got Jack Russo via the technology of Zoom, and he is, I don't know, is his new home in Florida or temporary home, or but there he is. Hey, Jack.
I've been looking at a lot of real estate here in Florida. It's amazing how much less expensive it is than Silicon Valley. I mean, it just about knocks your socks off, and it really is a completely different market. And they build here for a fraction of what we build in California. I mean, you and I know we've been talking to people that are doing modular and prefab and trying to get the price per square foot down, doing all sorts of contortions. And some of those may work, but we also know the price is still very high in California and very high for the land. And here, man, they've got land, they got people willing to work for reasonable hourly rates. They've got people that know how to build stuff quickly, and they build at less than 100 a square foot with the land, and a really decent house for 150 with really decent land in a really decent location, and you can't get anything in California for that price.
Yeah, no, it is. That's true. So our topic today is the question we're going to throw out, we're going to discuss a little bit and dialogue on is we're seeing rents dropping drastically in, I'll call major cities right now. I don't know what's going to happen to the outlining cities, but we're calling major cities when we say that. I think particularly we're going to talk about San Francisco and New York, because those would be considered major cities that have seen a significant drop in rents over the last several months. So the question is, we're going to talk about, what does that mean? Does that mean the next shoe to drop is going to be home prices? Does that mean people are going to continue to move out? And then on top of that, we have people getting fed up with the taxes. I mean, you hear it in New York all the time. They're leaving the city. And I was thinking a while back, look at when San Francisco, we'll use those two as examples for our show today. I can't tell you how many people I know that work and live in the city, and they're tired of it. They're matter of fact, they're afraid to go into many areas where they used to not have any fear to visit the city. So it's interesting what's taking place, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And real quick before we do that, though, Jack, what do you say the Florida? Would you say 8 to 10 times less expensive or cheaper to build a home?
Yeah, easily for building new is just phenomenally cheaper. And the stock of housing that's on the market that's pretty decent shape. Now you get a lot of rain, and you get a lot of weather, and you get a lot of rusting. If you're near the ocean or near the Gulf of Mexico, you're going to get the salt water. So there's rust, there's stuff that you don't see necessarily in Silicon Valley. You see some of it in San Francisco because that fog comes in and it's got a lot of salt in it, and that salt does wear down the outer part of a structure or the roofing or the rest. So there's different maintenance curves that apply. But generally speaking, the quality of the housing, my way of thinking, Florida is a lot newer and a lot fresher than a lot of the old stuff you see both in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. But let's sharpen the question, because I think there's a fork in the road, which is commercial rents on commercial office buildings have completely tanked. And you're focused on residential. But if we put to one side for a different show, commercial rents, I am telling you, companies are not going back to those tall buildings for a while. It may be like years, because the employees are working well at home, apparently, for a lot of them.
Right.
The transition Silicon Valley made is way, way better than the transition most other localities have made, where people are used to going to some location for a job. Silicon Valley was wired from the get-go, so people just got into this whole Zoom.
Yeah, looks like we got a bit of
compared to other geographies, is probably getting through this better with less layoffs and less problems. But office buildings in Silicon Valley, they're empty, and it's not clear that people are going back. I'm on the board of several companies. Every board meeting, it's like, are we going to go back? No, the people don't need it. Well, what are we doing with the lease? Well, we're going to find someone to sublease. Have you gotten anyone? No. What's the pricing of the sublease? Maybe 25% of the original lease price, 25%, like you're taking 75% off. So put all the commercial stuff to one side and focus on the residential stuff. And I think the residential stuff is dropping because a lot of people are getting worried that you can't live in a highly dense area anymore without risking a COVID infection. There's just too many people. There's too many people in San Francisco. There's too many people in an apartment building. There's too many people in an elevator. There's too many people going up and down the stairs. And a lot of people are very conservative, and they don't really want to interact. I mean, they literally just do want to shelter in place, and they do shelter in place.
Yeah, and I take it to another dimension here. I was thinking the other day when I was doing some research on a lot of this stuff on a daily basis, like I do, is now you also wonder this HOA, right? This whole dynamic, for those that understand HOAs, first of all, it's a license to rip people off in many different cases. These fees that are being charged for HOAs, it's astonishing to me when in the middle of this business for 20 plus years. But my point behind this is that you wonder, the draws of some of these HOAs is, we have the pools, we have the spa, we have the exercise, we have all this stuff. How is that going to be affected now with those costs associated with people really having second thoughts about paying these expensive HOAs for what?
Well, I can tell you here in Florida, the HOA that supports typically a community pool, they call it something different here. They call it like community development fund.
Right.
They have a different name for it.
Right.
They think of HOA more like the security and maybe like the changing the light bulbs on the street, but then they have this separate fee for the pool. But I have to tell you, I'm surprised at that fee in California would be like anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month for that recreation center.
Right.
Here it's like $50 to $100 a month. It's shockingly low for the facility, and the people do tend to view that as the town center. Like if you look at Florida, it's a lot of strip malls. It's a lot of like you drive to a strip mall. It's not like walking to the town center. Like you live in San Jose, you could walk to restaurants, you could walk to a bar, you could walk to a pizza place. It's not that way in Florida. You get in a car, you drive to a strip mall. Well, the town center that you would walk to, and people do walk to it, although it has a big parking lot, is this community pool, community workout center. And I'll tell you what they're doing. It's interesting. They take COVID so seriously that they close the workout gym, and I think even the pool, every other hour to clean up the furniture and clean up the machines. So they've got these high school kids running around with some sort of cleansing solution, spraying stuff down and wiping stuff off because they effectively want to make sure they're not a transfer point.
Right.
And you have to time your gym thing correctly, because if you get there a little too early, they're still in the process of cleaning up, because they literally take about 4 segments of the day to do a cleanup 4 times a day. Over and over again, they're following up and cleaning up. Like, wow, I was pretty impressed with that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
At the same time, people are still going. People are still going and working out and swimming.
So you think, back to our topic here, that you're seeing the commercial really take a fall we're seeing what's happening with the rent so far. Again, I think because we're in this little isolated bubble in Silicon Valley, but I do ultimately wonder, I don't know if I should say it has to, but you wonder what kind of rippling effect it's going to have on the home values.
Well, we got a very low interest rate that's sort of indirectly propping up at least the low end, and the low end of the market, as you know, in Silicon Valley is kind of a joke, like
$1 million.
Yeah, like people here in Florida laugh when they say $1 million, man. You can get a beautiful estate with a boat ramp and maybe a boat thrown in as well. Like they talk about luxury lifestyle above anything above 750 for them is like, man, that's a super luxury house. I mean, they think of the conforming low number as like 510. Right. I think it's much higher. Isn't it higher in California than 510?
765, yeah.
Right. So, but here in Florida, it's like 510.
Right.
And their view of life is most properties really should be far less than 510.
Right.
Like they see, you can get a beautiful 3,000 square foot home, brand new, brand spanking new, on a piece of property with a backyard, with a little bit of a view in the backyard, and a community center membership for like $350.
Man, wow.
I mean, think about that. Brand new. And we're talking granite, and we're talking top of the line appliances, and we're talking 3-car garage, automatic, garage door goes up and down, all the standard conveniences, security system, all of the bells and whistles of a modern house. I mean, the only thing they don't do, which surprised me, is they don't bake in all of the Alexa, set the TV, Alexa, do this. Like they could add a few bucks worth of electronics and say, this is a modern everything. I'm talking to Alexa, and Alexa's coming on saying, I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
That's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Alexa's in the background. She's like, what's going on here? But conceptually, they haven't quite gotten to that Silicon Valley, hey, we spend an extra couple of thousand on electronics. So when you walk in, you could say, turn on the lights and turn on the stereo and do this and do that. But they'll get there because these builders compete with typical dual income households. Right. It's just not a dual income household like in Silicon Valley, where dual income households are making like $500,000-$600,000 a year. Here, like they're making maybe 100 dual income together.
So, do you think my take on this, for the first time in my lifetime in Silicon Valley, I think, which could really have a paradigm shift to make a difference for people coming in and out of California, or leaving mostly. My take has been this as I do the research, Jack. I want to hear what you have to say. I think there's two primary reasons that'll finally take us to that point, maybe. And I would say one of them's COVID and the uncertainty and now navigating the way business is going forward. And I think the second one is the tax structure within the state. I really think those two things could finally have an impact on the housing market. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'd add a third thing. I agree with you on the two, but I'd add a third, which is companies getting up and moving, like Schwab, or like Tesla might move. That's a big signal. When you get a CEO and a board, and if the CEO, like Elon Musk, says we're going to do it, the board's just going to cave in. Or even Tim Cook, who's not, has an independent board, arguably. If Tim Cook said, look, we just built this nice space saucer building, beautiful, ginormous, modernized building, but man, we got to find females for our board of directors that we can't find, or we're going to be penalized by the state. We've got regulation, we've got taxes, we got so many issues, and we're running out of land. I mean, let's also face it, Silicon Valley is not like Florida. It's running out of land. It's not like there's land galore to build more buildings. So somewhere in this, anyone that's looking at the future starts to say, is it competitive to be in California if you can save a ton of money in, say, Nevada or Texas or Florida or any other non-tax state, or states that give huge subsidies to people that move because they want to get the jobs? And California is not one of those states. I mean, California doesn't do it. New York is the same way. I mean, New York, particularly Manhattan, I mean, this is a good question. If you say, who are the top 6 cities?
Yeah.
I went through this today because I was surprised to find that Philadelphia is number 5 in the top 6 cities. I always thought
Really?
of Philadelphia. Yeah, I was surprised. So like you say, New York is a top city, Los Angeles. Another one that surprised me is Houston is one of the top 5 cities. I always thought Dallas, but Dallas is below Houston. Houston apparently has exploded.
Didn't have any idea.
Exploded. So you go through the top 5, and the other one is Phoenix. Phoenix is in the top 5 cities. So if you look and you Google what are the top 5 cities, or if I say, Alexa, what are the top 5 cities in the United States? Let's see if she answers. You hearing this?
I don't hear it. What's Alexa's?
New York, Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
Phoenix.
Ah, interesting.
She went through the list. We were talking over it, but it was the list I gave you: Philadelphia, Phoenix, Houston, New York, and Los Angeles. And they do it by head count. And, I think the head counts are going to shrink in those cities because I do think people are going to get the sense that they're not safe from a biological point of view, and they're not safe from a crime point of view. And they're not safe because there's protesters that are heading to the streets and the police are maybe overreacting. So my own sense is we're seeing a certain decentralization. The cities were probably too crowded anyway, so it's probably okay. But if you own apartment buildings or you own residential housing in a big city, it might be a signal that you might want to get out, depending on how you feel about that city. Like today, I was talking to a broker in Philadelphia, and he said, no, Philadelphia is fine because it turns out Philadelphia has like this big healthcare aspect to it, where a lot of people go there for their hospitals and the universities, because it's got the University of Pennsylvania, it's got Temple, it's got a bunch of universities, Villanova. It's got a lot of universities that are doing medical research and also serving various patients. But to get back to your question is, yes, it should normally, if rents drop, it should normally generate a drop in the expected value of the cash flows from the property, which should result in any sort of expected value analysis in a drop in the value of the underlying dirt or the underlying real estate. The problem is, or the issue is, Europeans are parking money in real estate in the United States because they can't get any return on bank deposits in Europe. So we got this funny, weird flow of money.
Interesting.
Europeans and Chinese and Asians, they can't get returns in their own country, and they feel the U.S. is still pretty safe, as crazy as our politics have been. It's a safe investment, and usually there's still going to be a 2 to 3% minimum return, even though all expenses are paid, and it's safe because you can kind of go to the address and see that there's a building there and there's somebody in it, some tenant in it at some rate, paying for something. But yeah, I mean, I think what happens is the better quality properties do better than kind of the junk properties. And as people start upgrading to better and better properties because they say, who needs to live here? I can get for the same rent something that's far better.
Well, and I would think you mentioned it earlier. I do think the other one to keep an eye on, if I was a real estate investor with commercial and some, would be the high-rise stuff, right? I mean, when you really think about it, because when you're talking high-rise now, you're talking about elevators, which people are very skeptical of. What are going to be the parameters around that? Parking. I could go on and on about the stuff that has to be monitored going forward now with COVID and regardless, I mean, not that I don't care, but I think under the best case circumstances, let's just say they come up with a vaccine by the end of the year and they start, people start inoculating people and they start working on it. We have no idea what kind of effect and what kind of changes, I would guess, until at least Q2 next year.
Yeah, I think it's even 2022, Joe, because a third of the population is anti-vaccine.
That's
a third of the U.S. population thinks vaccines, even flu shots, are foreign substances you're putting in your body. Like there's this whole movement of purity. You could say people that do yoga, people that are vegan, people that don't eat meat, people that are vegetarian. They kind of believe any foreign substance, even an aspirin, going in your body is disrupting the natural flow and rhythm of your body. And they're really big believers that if they can live like, pure juice and pure this and pure that. And so about a third of the population in the US will not take a vaccine, period, full stop. Well, that means if they're getting infected, they're going to infect other people. And it's not really clear what the consequence is when people are getting vaccinated, but other people aren't getting vaccinated, and what really happens in kind of the long run here.
Right.
And the other thing that's unclear is this thing going to morph into some new strain that any vaccine is sort of behind the curve on? In other words, is it one of those things where it's like the common cold? We haven't solved that problem in many ways because it keeps changing every year.
Yeah.
Every year it's another change, and they're always guessing at what should they do with the flu shot for 2020. They're doing guessing about what variations are happening, and they're trying to do a best guess of the analysis. But getting back to the topic at hand, which is if people start moving, and I've known a lot of people who are literally moved back with their parents. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I'm saying a lot of young people that worry that, hey, I can't afford to be with a bunch of roommates that are partying and bring germs in and, bring maybe infections in. They're splitting from their roommate situations. They're going back to mom and dad. And that's having some interesting ramifications. Something on the news today said that drinking is down. And one of the reasons drinking it just surprised the hell out of me, because I thought drinking was way up. I said drinking is down, particularly among young people, because they're going back home and they're subject to some discipline at home. And I thought, discipline, I could see the parents say, hey man, we're going to drink with you at this point.
Oh,
but no, they said it's actually down. That surprised me. That data really surprised me.
Well, in the sake of time here, we want to try to keep it to about 30 minutes. So how long are you going to be in Florida? When are you coming back?
I don't know. I just look every day that, hey, I'm glad to be alive and not have COVID. And I go ride my bike. I got a bicycle here now, Joe. I've discovered the bicycle paths here. There's a lot of bicycle paths here. It's like Silicon Valley needs to learn some things from Florida, and Florida needs to learn some things from Silicon Valley. But I'll tell you, they invested in some bicycle paths, and it's mostly flat. And the problem I always thought, I was always amazed that you could not ride a bike. It's only about 24 miles from Silicon Valley to San Francisco. You can, but man, it's a hellacious ride. It's not like a ride that you would want to take and enjoy.
Right.
We should figure out at Silicon Valley how to cut some bicycle paths where you can do that 24-mile ride. I mean, look, I used to ride from Brooklyn over the Brooklyn Bridge, as you know, uptown to Manhattan, and I thought that was hellacious, but I was a young kid when I did it. And there were sort of bicycle paths even back in the 1970s, but we have not in Silicon Valley really invested in bicycle paths, and they've done that here. The odd part is there aren't a lot of people riding bikes because it's too hot out. So they don't like riding the bikes because it's too hot.
Well, before we go, remind everybody that even though Jack's in Florida, his firm's still up and running, and they're doing a lot of good work.
We work 7 by 24 now. I'm up at 5 in the morning, which is 2 in the morning California time. People in California are like, man, don't you ever go to sleep? But we're probably more 7 by 24 as a firm because we've got the West Coast covered. I'm also licensed in Hawaii, so we've got the really far West Coast covered. And now we have the East Coast covered, and we're actually more timely with a lot of our East Coast clients. So yes, the main way to reach me is usually by email, which is jrusso, JRUSSO, @computerlaw.com, computerlaw.com. But you can also call. We still answer the phone at 650-327-9800. But I do have a Florida business number, which is really a snazzy number, I think, if you like 813,
Yeah.
482-4870. So it's got 4 and 8, and so sort of like,
okay.
even numbers. And
Very
so,
good.
it ends in 0, so you can't beat that. And in general, I would say that there is the beginning of a Silicon Valley that's happening here in Florida, because there's been a recognition that the future is all about innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are starting to get that, and the universities here are starting to get that.
Also, I don't know if you got a chance yet, and I'll mention it right now because I'm excited about it, and I'm likely going to be on the advisory board for. Did you hear the podcast I did with Nature Quant this week? So Chris Bailey and his partner founded this Nature Quant. What it does, their first product is a nature score. So just like real estate and everybody else looks for where's crime, the best schools, where this, they've done this unique, really interesting technology play where you enter your address, whether it's in a city or wherever it is, or commercial or residential, and it tells you what the nature score is, which is really what all people are driving people's decisions now. Like, the nature score goes into environment, toxins, creeks, are you near trees, are you near water, are you near, and the technology takes all that and gives it a score. You have to go take a look at it, naturequant.com.
So that's a little bit like walkability, but instead of walkability, it's more like the overall ecosystem.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, there is something to being able to leave and feel like you're in nature. Like in Silicon Valley, a lot of people don't know that there are lots of hiking trails, there are lots of easements, there are lots of horse trails. You need to know how to find them because they're obviously not anywhere near the freeways.
Right.
But people in Silicon Valley know how to find them and know how to find those hiking trails. Similarly, here, there's a lot of bike paths and a lot of other hiking trails that probably are underutilized, but would probably be affecting that nature score in some way. So I will put some addresses in there, but it sounds like you published a podcast where you...
Yeah, we just published a podcast with the founder this week, and it was an interesting take. And so I'm going to be helping making some introductions for them in the real estate world. And I'm excited for them. I think it's a great program, and I think it's got a lot of opportunity and potential. So for those that are listening to this podcast, go on to naturequant.com and navigate, look around a little bit. Pretty interesting. Take a look at it, see what you think.
Yeah, I would think that what they're sort of saying is it's not about walkability to a restaurant or a bar in a dense city. It's a walkability to nature now.
Right.
So it's kind of flipped everything inside out.
Well, it's an interesting twist. And we could do another podcast as it relates to real estate with that. But what I also find interesting is the score also encompasses the health and the wellness of the area and the stress of the area and all this stuff, right? It's kind of interesting what's gone into it, where their vision is they could see doctors sitting down. You come into the doctor's office and they start asking you, what's wrong? I'm stressed, I'm depressed. And so one of the first things they ask you, they punch onto their laptop is, where do you live? And they could start referring to a score.
Well, what that's saying to me is there are places that are kind of anti-aging places, and there are places that accelerate aging.
Yes.
So I don't think any of us would want to live in any of those towns in Michigan that have all the bad water and all the sort of nasty kind of pollution. Similarly, there are these blue zones in different countries of the world. It would be interesting to know how Nature Score would evaluate those blue zones, because they're where people routinely live to north of 110. And people think it has something to do with the way in which those folks eat, the way in which they work, the way in which they exercise. And there's been lots of writing that certain geographies are sort of inducing better aging or slower aging over time, whereas others, highly polluted areas and the like, I think of D.C., Washington, D.C. is a place that if you look at president before a president goes in and look at a president after a president comes out, you compare side by side, man, there's a lot of aging that's going on in Washington, D.C. Trump actually looks pretty good, comparatively speaking, but if you look at Obama before and after, or Bush before and after, it's really quite a statement.
All right, well, Jack's good doing the show. Good seeing you, and all the best out there. We'll connect next week with another topic.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
You too.
Joe Cucchaira with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for those that are tuning in. For more information, you could always go to RERadiolive.com. Take care. Have a great rest of the week.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.